Hi everyone, hi Ishveen. This is Unmuted by Big Karma, the podcast where we go behind the scenes of entertainment and business and how things are done, secret sauce. Even sometimes we're going to talk about our vulnerable moments because we've seen from Elon Musk that authenticity is a thing and it's very well aligned with our values here at Big Karma. Long story short, we make a video game about inclusion and diversity, pushing forward a cast of disabled athletes from many different countries. You can check more about that on our Patreon program. It's at the bottom of this podcast for those who watch the video. And for those who listen, it's patreon.com/Big Karma. Today with me, I have Ishveen Anand, the CEO of Open Sponsorship and a great friend of mine. We've done a lot of business together. A few of these things maybe we can reveal during the show and and have fun. So Ishveen, how have you been? We're going to talk a lot about sports today, and I'm so glad to have you with me.
Thank you, Pascal. I'm so honored to be your guest here today.
All right. So we're friends, and we might as well reveal that to the audience so to entertain myself a little bit and not get bored too quickly. Let's start with something I don't know about you. How did you even start and get into sports?
Yeah. I'm surprised you don't know this actually, Pascal, but I suppose sports I've always been in because I used to play. Growing up, I was netball, cricket. I mean, you literally, if there was a spot open on a tennis court or wherever, I wanted to be in it. So I played sports growing up, and then I started working in sports when I was 24 after a couple of years in consulting, when I realized that my calling, similar to you, was to ideally give back to the sports industry. That's kind of what I wanted to do and what I will do eventually, but kind of fell into sponsorship.
All right. And I think you grew up in the UK, didn't you?
Correct.
Which we can which we can pick up from your sexy accent. And yet I've seen that on your LinkedIn. We've never talked about that before. I think you got into cricket first, and then this is the part I know much more about you. You got into US sports. So it's not just that you get into sports, it feels there is a complete trajectory there, right?
Yeah.
Tell me more about the beginnings and cricket and all that.
So I moved to India in 2009 because I thought, well, if I'm going to make this big career move and piss off my parents, I might as well do it all in one go. So I was like, I'm leaving consulting, I'm going into sports, and I'm moving to India at the same time, which now when I look back, I'm like, oh God, that was pretty crazy. So obviously India, cricket is number 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sport over there. And so started working in the Indian Premier League. I mean, I had played cricket, so I was familiar with cricket, but to be honest, I had not watched that much cricket growing up. So I didn't really recognize any of the players. I knew the game and I learned sponsorship. I wasn't like a fan moment, which I think was probably quite important, to be honest, for like my first job in sports. And so it was just an amazing experience, like India, unlike the US, where everything is so regulated and the NBA tells the teams what to do, the teams tell the athletes what to do and whatever else, and it's all laid out. India, it was like, as a sponsor, KFC, you want to put a box in the sky and serve chicken? Sure, we'll try and make that happen. And so it was literally like, let's just try and do it. We had motorbikes on like behind wicket keepers and whatever else. It was interesting. Activation was interesting. And so I think that was like such a great place to learn sponsorship because you kind of said yes first and then made it happen. Whereas I feel like in the US, it's like you kind of say no and then see if you can make it happen.
That's a funny one. You already triggered a couple of things in me. So first of all, I like really what you said about the fact that you were not a fan, and so, to put words in your mouth, you were not starstruck. I've had that advantage when I worked for a racing game in the racing category. I've never driven a car in my life. I don't have a driver's license. And that was very helpful for me to leave the emotions that my CEO, who was a car fanatic, would have whenever he would talk to a brand or to an event or to a racer. He would have his own emotional baggage of how much he loves, sometimes from childhood, this or that person, where I would just look at the numbers. And can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think from my side, I'm a fan of sport as a whole, and I'm a fan of the game of cricket, and therefore selling sponsorship was easy for me. And, you know, because I believe in sports marketing, I believe in sports. Also, back in 2009, when I joined, you know, Facebook was a thing, but not Instagram. And so today you meet someone and you like look up on your phone and be like, oh my God, you have like 70 million followers. Like, wow, you must be massive. But back in the day, like, people were just people, and the fault, you know, so obviously I knew like the team I worked for had like Sachin Tendulkar, god of cricket, like Harbhajan Singh, like these, like Lassit Malinga from Sri Lanka, like these big names. And I knew, and obviously I recognized the name and whatever else, but it wasn't like, you're just people to me. And that meant like in the business world, I wasn't like, oh, I can't ask them for things. Like if a sponsor needed something, I was like, okay, we should do something. Or, you know, my whole focus wasn't like, oh, they're stars. I think it's actually harder now because instantly I would have known how famous they really were. And I think social media has probably made them more aware of their own. I mean, obviously everyone knows they're famous when they're famous, but like you're kind of secluded, you're in a little bubble. But like now it's so easy for you to be like, look at how many followers I have and who are you and whatever else. And so I think it was just like I think it's quite hard for me to get starstruck. But having said that, I knew I was also in a very professional setting. And so, you know, I was there to work, I wanted to learn. And I think it was just helpful that cricket was something I was so passionate about. Like I got to play in the nets with some of these guys, and that was all. I mean, that like is a fangirl moment when you know someone's bowling at you and you're like, that's amazing. But it wasn't professionally. I wasn't scared, I'd say.
And that's a great point, because I would argue with you that to be successful in entertainment, you have to be fearless. Yeah. If you keep thinking about, oh, but they might say no for this and that reason, then you never propose anything to anybody, because you always, at least at the beginning, you're always smaller. And even in the end, I still am smaller today than all the people I told to. But like you, I don't get starstruck easy. And so I think that's how we tend to approach people. Did you take that? Don't you think this is something you take with you, though? That the fact that you're not starstruck now when you meet people who might have impressed you in the past is because you started with those. You somehow gained your confidence with those where you're not. And like you said, they're just people. Obviously, every now and then you have divas with big ego, and Mariah Carey seems to be somebody difficult to work with, I've heard. But but most stars are refreshingly, sometimes, and this year you agree, I find their managers to be less approachable than the star himself or herself.
Yeah. I think when I'm not like I was at a conference a few years back and I met Kevin Durant, and he's so tall, and you know he was doing so well, and I definitely had a moment of like, this is very cool, and we took a photo together, and I remember being like, that I'm glad I took that photo, whereas usually, but I think the difference is like once you start working with someone, the relationship changed, which as it should. And I hadn't worked with him. I was at this conference, and we met and we got introduced for this photo, whatever else. So I think the difference is that am I sitting on the basketball court side, like enjoying you as an athlete, or a music artist or whatever else, or am I working with you? And I think you have to be able to like switch your brain between the two. So sometimes I say like I don't know if I ever want to meet like some of my favorite music artists, because I don't want to see a different side to them. I want to be like a fangirl to some of them.
Have you met some of your heroes? Have you met some of your heroes?
Have I met some of my heroes? A few of like the older generation, yeah. Which is very cool. Like people I've learned from. It's funny, like we entered a partnership with Louis Saha, and he used to play for Manchester United when I was growing up, and Manchester United was my team. And so, but again, now we're in a partnership and it's different. But like, I think people for whom when I was growing up, they were icons, like that is, and it's interesting because in sponsorship, you have so many brands who are focused on the young because they want the younger audience. But actually, as an individual, your favorite moments are probably like when you go to the Super Bowl and you get to meet like Joe Namath or Joe Montana or your legends. So it's actually quite interesting how the desire for who you want as a brand is actually quite different for who you actually revere as your favorite.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And that's exactly what I meant with the emotions gets in the way. That if you go with emotions, when you meet the people you've seen on TV, like for me, it would be Ronaldinho, Zinedine Zidane, Michael Jordan. Oh my God, Michael Jordan. I discovered basketball in 1992, like the rest of Europe, with the Dream Team. And then it was all about MJ, and everybody wanted to play basketball and bought a Spalding ball that summer in Europe. And when or Charles Barkley, sometimes if I go with my heart, Charles Barkley might impress me more than Stephen Harvey, who plays now for the NBA, and I don't watch the NBA as much as I used to. And I'm not a kid anymore, so I'm not impressionable as much. But obviously, if you want to cater to youth, it's the same as comparing Facebook and TikTok or old TV and TikTok. At some point, you have to be where they are with the stars they know. So you're Logan Paul, Mr. Beast. And it's funny that my daughter is more impressed by the people I book, where like I'm more impressed by the people I end up not booking. Because the buyer doesn't want to, because it doesn't appeal to the demographic it is today. So it's all about what we've lived in our childhood, right? Those moments where we were sitting in the sofa watching TV and having big dreams, but being small little kids and thinking all of this would not be possible anyway.
100%.
Now, when you moved to the US, tell me more about that. No, first of all, you know what? I've moved to Hong Kong when I was 24, and it was awesome and it was career changing and all that. But the first month was very tough. I was very lonely. And I discovered a lot about myself in relocating to another country. And I think it's one of those things in life that most people don't realize how hard it is until you do it, because it's not a holiday. It's not a quick travel. Mm-hmm. How was it for you, your first month in India?
Yeah, it was really tough. Not only, I mean, India is so different, obviously, to anywhere else in the world. But I changed industry. And then not only industry, but, as a management consultant, I used to wear a suit every day to work. I would sit at my desk and I would use, Microsoft Excel, Access and Excel and be building models and whatever else and PowerPoints. And then I came to India and it's like you're selling and you're in meetings and it's like all soft skills. I probably didn't even open up a laptop for like the first 3 months. So like it was so many changes. The way people are managed, like India, like many Asian countries, has like managers will shout at you to tell you off, and it's a little bit more aggressive, whereas obviously England is so polite. So it was a lot.
By polite, you mean passive aggressive?
Passive aggressive. It was passive. You can ignore it. So I'd say, I think it was just, and my consulting job, like everyone was like Oxbridge, same background, and then you're in India. And I remember, I think my first ever client meeting, the guy basically didn't even he faced his laptop away from me towards my boss, who white male, and didn't even acknowledge me. I was in the room, and then this guy, my boss, walked out, and then he starts talking to me. He's like, "Oh, you have a British accent." I was like, "Yeah, I just moved here." And then he asked me a bit more, and then obviously he found out my background, and then was like, "Oh, let me show you this presentation." And I was just like, so I think I realized the need to validate myself, the need to probably use my background in a way that I my educational, my professional background in a way that I didn't need to do in England, where it was just obviously a given because I was, where I was. And so I think there was just a lot, but you survive and then you thrive. So, yeah.
I think that's another thing you learn from relocating. I have this theory that people who have traveled enough cannot be racists. And that's because when you see, it's like with religions. All religions are stupid, except yours. And when you see enough religions, you start taking that with some relativity. And it's the same with the various forms of racism. Racism is so different from one culture to the next, but also so absurd in each and every instance. And so when you're on the other end of the stick and you encounter it differently and in a way that is so obviously cliche and baked into another culture, it's like if it happens to you in a cartoon almost. It hits home. It's like, oh, but maybe when I say this or do this at home, it's also perceived as I just took it. I always say I've been a guaylo in Hong Kong and a gaijin in Japan. So I know what it is to be that box, that label. Guaylo in Hong Kong in Cantonese actually means white devil. So it's not endearing at all. And I've always found it funny because, I've been a little white devil when I was younger anyway. But at least my mom thinks so. But yeah, that I've seen one instance of racism that is so funny to me. Well, so funny if I take it with distance, but also so tragic somehow. In Mexico, they have walled the rich neighborhoods from the poor neighborhoods.
Wow.
And they almost know, in Mexico, DF, the city of Mexico, and they almost don't interact with the poor and don't go into these neighborhoods because be careful, it's so dangerous, you're not going to survive. They might eat children for all we know. But obviously the poor people speak a different Mexican Spanish than the ones who've been to the university and live in these walled, wealthy neighborhoods. So it gets to a point where the rich ones talk about the poor ones they call them the nacos. So there is a word for them. It's like a separate race. And they imitate the way they speak as if it was a different language. And that is racism between people of the same nationality, same race. which probably is the stem of all, the root cause of all racism, economic.
Yeah.
The rich hates on the poor. It just so happens that in most countries, the poor are immigrants in majority because they start with a more difficult challenge, so less of them succeed. But in countries where they don't have a lot of immigrants, they'll find a way.
Right.
They'll find a way to hate on each other. Don't worry about it.
100%.
All right. Now to the big move. Cricket, India, UK, and then all of a sudden you become my favorite US sports agent. What happens? Because America, if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? So how did that happen?
I actually moved to America because I met my now ex-husband. And so that's what brought me over. And I was naive though, like, because it sounds so funny, but America, yeah, I'll give you a story. I was once on the phone to a girlfriend and she was like, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the World Series. And she went, oh, who's playing? I was like, the Mets and whoever else they were competing against, Kansas. And she was like, why is it called the World Series?
Right.
Yeah, right.
I asked myself that as a kid all the time. Belgium is not in it, right?
Exactly. And then I was like, oh my God, you're right. But the same way that we joke about America being like the center of the world, so is in sports sometimes the Commonwealth. So like I had gone for cricket to India, South Africa, West Indies, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. I mean, these are all, I'm sure there are more, all countries I'd been to. And so when I moved to America, I was just like, very naive. I was like, where's the cricket? Like, of course, there must be something here. Pinged my friend who was the CEO of the International Cricket Council, so like David Stern of cricket. And I was like, hey, what's going on in America? Like, can I just figure something out? And he was like, no. And that's when I really realized that, oh my God, like, and I know it sounds so naive, but again, because I didn't watch much sports growing up, as I said, played, but not watched. I suppose I didn't really know how different the sports scene was. And so when I landed, I was like, oh my God, like, this is so different. And then even commercialization, I mean, sponsorship is the number one form of monetization, media dollars and sponsorship, rest of world. But in America, it's ticket sales, it's hospitality. It's, that's like everyone gets out of college and they go into ticket sales and then they work their way up. So the business of sports is different. Like the actual sports are different. Like the way that I remember the first, like, obviously from Manchester, a United supporter, United had like, at one, I don't know how many they have now. One time they had like 13 telecom partners across the world. I mean, they had a telecom partner in Afghanistan, and like regional sponsorships, and that's how a lot of these teams, Liverpool, United, like that's how they drove their brand awareness. They'd partner with a regional partner in Asia, China, whoever, and it would promote them. And I found out when I was doing some work in America, so I started trying to understand the sports landscape, and I realized that like teams couldn't do a deal and have their logos used by that partner outside of like, I think it's like 75 kilometers from the stadium. And I think that was created in the Jordan area because otherwise everyone would have sponsored the Bulls and no one else would have got any money. I think so. Don't quote me what I'm saying on screen. But so I started being like, oh, this is so different. Like everything is very, very different here, which I suppose helped me to create open sponsorship because I was like, there's an opportunity. It's different. I like it. There's fragmentation. There's a real problem here. But don't get me wrong. At the beginning, I was like, what the hell am I doing?
And so, however, though, open sponsorship, somebody told me the other day, our good friend Ash told me the other day, open sponsorship is such a great idea. I don't understand why nobody has done this. And I told him that's because it's the easiest idea to have ever, but the execution of it is one of the hardest challenges you would face in your career. how do you get big name athletes to go on a platform like if they were Instagrammers and take you seriously? So how did you break that conundrum? Because I can say it for you so that the audience don't think you're biased. Open sponsorship is a success. It's now approaching Series A. It has really big name athletes in all sports. Some of them we've done deals together, or others we're about to. So how did that happen? Because seeing the problem and the need is one thing. Convincing the people who need that service that they actually need it when they are so successful and rich and famous already is another entirely. So tell us more about the secret sauce of your success.
I'd say obviously we weren't the first to have the idea. As I realized when we launched, people were like, tried this and failed, or they tried it and failed. And, timing is a big thing. And to be honest, like, we've now been doing it over 6 years. And so if I started today, I think it would have been a quicker success. Obviously, 6 years worth of hard work does pay off and helps you to grow as a CEO, entrepreneur, whatever else. But I still think we were quite early to do what we did. But I would say that having been in the sponsorship weeds and having worked with some of the biggest teams in the world and some of the best players in the world, what I knew is the brand was everything. The brand dollars are everything, which obviously you know. And so when we launched, to be honest, I was quite agnostic to should it be athlete? Should it we had the Mets sign up, we had the Mavericks sign up, I think we had the Heat sign up, and then then we had some athletes sign up, we had some events sign up, and I was just like, all right, and I was like, great, let's just create this marketplace. And what we did quite early on was start really listening to the brands and being like, okay, what can we do for you, and what won't we do for you? And so a lot of people get surprised that we don't work with a lot of sports brands. We recently just started about a year back, started working with Foot Locker, and that's great. But Nike, Adidas, Reebok, not yet. I think we're close. And honestly, it was because they don't have that pain point. They're like, well, we could call anyone we know, right? We don't need a service like this. And then it was interesting to figure out, okay, well, big brands who have agencies may not need us. Okay, so then there's small brands, but do they have the budget? Or then there's these mid-level brands, or what about the CPG brands who have big budgets but don't understand sports? Oh, that's a really interesting sector. So I think what we did really well was not pivot, but keep switching and changing messaging, testing out. And obviously it helped that I was our first salesperson for the longest time. And so I was listening to what they were saying, and my technical co-founder was listening to my pitch and trying to create product out of it. And so I think we went after the brands, and that was important. We didn't go straight and say okay, let's try and get LeBron James or Tiger Woods. In fact, when we met a lot of these agencies, I still remember actually, I pitched CAA, very senior person at CAA. He was like, why would we ever need this? Of course we don't need this. We have a whole sales team. I was like, okay. And then, we went off and signed other people up in other ways. And then I remember that our first ever CAA deal was done through the tennis team. And then what happened was, so we did that deal, and then she must have told other people at her level, so not this most senior level, hey, you should check out this platform. We just did this deal for quite a bit of money through this platform. And then the basketball guys signed up, and then the football guys signed up. But it was the junior sports agents. It wasn't the most famous. And they're the ones who are tasked with going out and getting sponsorship deals. The contract agent, he's got a relationship with Nike, pulls in $1 million and then does contracts. So I think what we did also correct, I didn't have a big ego in the sports game. I didn't need everyone to know who we were and to make sure that the top guy at CA knew that they were using us. Because also I remember I thought about, should I message him and say, hey, we did that? And then I thought, no, because he might turn around to that person and say, why the hell did you use this website? So let's not let anyone know that they're using us. And so, we were actually for our like investment, we were pitching an NBA player recently, and he was like, why do most of the NBA players on your site not know that they're on your site? And I was like, because if we go out and we're like, hey, you're on our platform, does the agent pull them? And we rely on the agents, especially for the bigger athletes and, you know, whatever else. So I think honestly, like a lot of people in sports do have an ego, and it's being cool and like hanging out with the athletes. And, you know, back to our earlier point, that wasn't it for me. Like, I really want to solve this problem. I'm really passionate about sponsorship marketing. And so I suppose I took a hit on open sponsorship brand, rightly or wrongly, but focused on revenue and brand and like doing deals.
Rightly. And I tell you why. When you work in if you go into, anybody out here listening, if you go into sports marketing and endorsements, or into YouTube influencer marketing, or into serving music stars, you have to be perfectly cool of not taking the trophies. And if you are the one with no ego in a room full of egos, then they will come back to you, because with you they can take the trophy. and so a friend of mine wisely said, I'd rather be rich than right. And and so he will let you take all the credits you want, as long as he gets paid for the job he's done. And if you go into a room full of LeBron James, Kevin Durant, David Big Papi Ortiz, and you think you're gonna get a pat on the back, you're in the wrong line of business. You're not going to get noticed. Actually, it's like a referee's job in sports. You've done a great job if nobody noticed you.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the referee, something went wrong. The job of an agent is they don't talk about you. But so 2 tips I really think are good is, don't go to the big shot, go to the junior. Because the big shot already has, for a few years, a system that is working, that he has built, that he's responsible for, and that if he admits flows into it, is responsibility on the line. Plus, like you said, he might have developed his ego of being successful and growing in positions, in ranking. And he's conservative because it works well as it is. Why would he change it? He's winning the game as it is. Meanwhile, the hungry startup, or the hungry young kid, or the hungry junior who's fresh into the job has to prove himself or herself by getting a win quickly. And he doesn't know everybody, so he has to try new things. But the second tip, and that was really wise of you, is not rubbing it in the face of the higher up. Don't take the trophy. Just keep the client. Let things go into their own time. And if it takes a year or 2, by the time somebody brings you up in a meeting, you will have all this track record established in the company, and you cannot be phased out anymore. Really great story. And a success story, which is even better. What are the craziest, and you can name names if you want, you don't have to if you don't want to, but what are the craziest activations you've done in the US?
I don't know if we've done so much crazy stuff, to be honest. I actually think that's probably like a thing that irks me, which is the rise of influencer marketing, I think, has somewhat taken out the very creative side of sponsorship. And by that, I mean, you know, we're working with some really big brands at the moment, and it's like, I just want an IG post. And I'm like, okay, but let's create video, let's do fun things. No, let's just keep it simple. Like, here's our formula and whatever else. So I think like with athletes, sometimes there's a tendency to get like content that's repurposeful and safe versus trying to like push the boat out. And I get it. I get why do the risky thing, and then especially because a lot of what we do is like 1 to 3 month stuff. It's not annual. But even like our bigger deals, pretty safe stuff.
You say I get it. I don't. Yeah, really, because politically correct, brand safety, all that stuff, I understand where it comes from. I do not get how people go with it in the executive decision rooms and in the strategic meetings. Because in 20 years experience in marketing, there are 2 or 3 things I have learned. And one is you cannot please everyone. So you might as well pick your audience. If you had told me a couple of years ago, oh, but signing Colin Kaepernick for Nike might alienate the Trump voters. If I'm in that strategy room, I'm like, yeah, so what? Sacrifice these 82 million fools who are probably not buying our brand anyway, and if they do, who cares? There are 7 other billion people in the world who we can appeal to by taking this position. 7 billion versus 80 million. Which ones do we want? In numbers, it's clear. In values as well. Those one on the right, on the left column fits with our brand values. Those ones on the right would hate our brand values anyway, if they hate on Colin Kaepernick. So let's just be brave and pick a side, because we can't please both. You cannot please the black athlete and the racist neo-Nazi with the same messaging and the same brand. And there is something wrong with trying to sit in the middle, because that person in the middle is a mathematical ghost. Nobody is an average of positions. We all have strong positions. And so trying to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one, except that ghost you have created in some Excel profiling sheet, but that person doesn't exist. And the second thing, and there's a storm going on here in Colombia. I hope you don't hear it too much in the microphone. The second thing I've learned in marketing is you have to stand out from the crowds. Yeah. So if you're just cloning what is already successful, you are guaranteed that the best place for you is number 2. Right. And you automatically decide to put yourself in a rat race for that number 2 spot. Right. If you want to be number 1, you will have to innovate and either fail epically or create your own market. And if you don't bring, it's like in Hollywood, we always tell the same 4 or 5 stories, Romeo and Juliet, the hero's journey. But what's the theme? What's the context? That's what makes a movie stand out. That personality. A brand or a startup or an athlete without personality is not going to cut it in the age of authenticity on social media, because it's bland. And at the end of the day, if you look at Danny Alves, he has 31 million followers, which is twice as much as legendary Ronaldo, not Cristiano Ronaldo, Ronaldo 9, Brazilian. 3 times as much as Steven Gerrard. One could argue that on the pitch, he was not revered for his skills as these other 2 players. Right. Sure, but he gets social media. It makes me laugh in a press conference. His looks are completely insane. It's like he's coming out of Final Fantasy sometimes. So that tells me, oh, that guy is pretty cool, which is somehow more appealing than that guy is winning. Yeah, winners have followers. I get that. But I think winners with cool personality and who make us feel like Dave Chappelle, that we would like to hang out with them.
Yeah.
Those are not just getting my follow, they're getting my engagement. I'm checking them every day.
100%.
And so, and so to your point, the brand safety, the biggest risk on earth is to not take any risk. Hey, Ishveen, welcome back. We had a bit of a technical issue, and more than a bit because the power went off, and now it's days later. And you even look more suntanned than last time because you went to Mykonos on holiday and it's giving it away. So we might as well address it for those who are viewing. We had a bit of a technical problem. Let's
We're back.
get back in. While we were away, did you watch the Olympics?
Yes, I did. It was amazing.
All right. What did you? They pulled it off despite the lack of crowds, right? I was quite worried about that.
Yeah, I think it was. You got used to it quick, though. The first time you saw it, you were like, "Oh, that's weird." But it's amazing how quickly you can just think it's normal and get used to it.
Yes, to the point, I've watched a lot of soccer without crowds. And now I have sometimes the moment when the camera goes very fast, the crowds are back in the UK. But when the camera goes very fast, I'm like, oh, this is just the stuff they put there. And then I realize, oh no, it's real crowd. It's really, it's real crowd this time. It's not just noise. Have you talked to a few competing athletes since? How do you know how they felt? Because I guess from the stadium, on TV, you can fake stuff. For the competing athletes, it must be strange, right?
Yeah, you know what? I've not actually. We should probably do an interview with someone. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, when they're back, and they end up going on Oprah and all those more important people. But that's one thing. Right now, while we are talking, the Paralympics have begun, and obviously this is close to my heart. And when I watched Rising Phoenix on Netflix, I really saw all the drama from the Rio 2016 when, for some major fuck up, the tickets almost didn't go on sale, and you had the documentaries going through it with the organizing committee, and they're worried. And for them back then, it was like the end of the world, that the Paralympics might go without public. And so, having seen that before Tokyo, I really became worried about this time it's going to happen. Both the Olympics and the Paralympics, no public, 4 years of training, and how will it go? What did you make of the Simone Biles incident?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of had already seen it with like Naomi Osaka. So I suppose it's like you can empathize.
Naomi's the tennis player who pulled out for mental health reasons, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you've already experienced it once. Obviously, I mean, every time it happens, it's amazing, because I don't think as an individual you can even empathize or sympathize with that, or you can even imagine what it must be like, because you train so hard, and if it's that major of an issue and you decide to not compete, like that's absolutely it's heartbreaking, but it's real, and I think that's so important. It's about being real and understanding, or them using their voice and their actions to say I'm not okay, and that's pretty amazing. So heartbreaking but real.
Yes, and obviously from my big karma perspective, I saw this as an instance of, once again, society not acknowledging, respecting, and including disability. It's about disability recognition, because this is invisible disability. ADHD, I think, is how you say it in English. Attention disorder. And most of my stage performing artists in the circus, most of my friends who perform on stage, so 75% of them have ADHD. Why do you think they are so good on stage, and they train so hard and they practice so much? And two of my close friends like that are on Ritalin. And so this really resonated with me personally because I was like, yeah, when they don't take their Ritalin, they can't sit 5 minutes at the poker table and focus. It's really that bad. And people are like, but Ritalin is an amphetamine. Yes. And for you and me, it would act as an amphetamine. But if you have that specific condition, it has the reverse effect and it calms you down. The brain is a magical thing. And so to ask her to compete without that medicine is, it's like any other treatment. It's like asking a diabetic athlete to not take his or her insulin.
Yeah.
And that, and the even weirder thing was that it's just because of the laws of Japan, which recognize another treatment for ADHD. And so in Japan, Ritalin is not recognized as treatment for ADHD, and it's therefore a performance-enhancing drug. And that to me was a mix of administrative paperwork, Kafkaian situations, we call that in French, when suddenly it's like facing a robot. International things, because at the end of the day, Olympics are still an international thing that moves around the world and the laws might be different. But in the middle of all this, you have a human being who is the GOAT of a sport. It's like banning Michael Jordan or banning Maradona, but in the case of Maradona, it was a mix of cocaine and ephedrine, which deserves a ban. In this case, it felt so unjust, and it showed me again, we as a society have to recognize our differences a little bit more. Because what is Simone Biles supposed to do now? Go compete in the Paralympics and win everything? It's almost as if we are to the point of creating categories for everyone. And I sometimes joke, and then what? Shaq cannot play basketball because he's too tall for the others. And, it's just differences, but sports is supposed to be where we all come together. Anyway, end of my reaction to this, which obviously I had to make because it's those moments where you feel people are excluded. In esports, you see it as well. People who have disabilities sometimes use adaptive hardware. In esports tournament, this adaptive hardware is seen as cheating. And I always say, yeah, but why don't you homologate the person who actually carries a disability card and has been diagnosed and recognize that in his or her case, it's not cheating and he's obligated to use this hardware. It doesn't mean everybody else should. Anyway, what else did catch your eye at the Olympics?
I think it was just a beautiful event. I mean, it just reminds you how, I think the biggest thing is that Olympics is that time of year where people who don't necessarily follow sport come together to watch sport, which I just think is brilliant. Like, I had friends, family members just watching it all day, and like, you obviously always see it every year where the Olympics happens and everyone wants to play badminton or squash, or they want to get into sports again. So I think that despite COVID, despite no crowds, despite everything else, it achieved its purpose, which was to unite and to bring people together, to provide passion through sports, to, the underdog. I saw afterwards, like a Facebook, someone from Facebook had posted data on like the most trending athletes, and there was like this Indian javelin thrower. I think it was the last day of the Olympics, and he won gold, and first time India's ever won gold in track and field for sure, maybe even and the first time they were winning gold in this Olympics. And he got like 1,000,000% increase in following. So I mean, I love those stories. And he's from a really humble background where, he's in the army or navy or whatever else. So I just think that's what the Olympics does. It produces amazing stories. And it did that.
That's true. That's true. And about igniting the passion to practice new sports, you're absolutely right. I started playing basketball because of the 1992 Dream Team and all these superheroes coming to Europe for the first time. And We all started practicing basketball after that in Europe. And in Belgium, it's even weirder because it's a super small country that maybe wins 2 or 3 gold medals every now and then. And so each gold medal is celebrated like, the event. And every now and then you have somebody winning gold a lot in a sport that nobody cares for, and it becomes crazy popular in Belgium. Everybody, ping pong was one of them. That's why you have so many Belgian people practicing ping pong, is because of Jean-Michel Sèvres, that nobody will remember, but he was once a world champion, Olympic champion. And they celebrated him so much for so many years that, all right, ping pong seems to be a popular sport, and everybody started playing it.
I do think like it validates it to your parents. Like obviously they included skateboarding this year for the first time, right? And if you're a skateboarding kid and suddenly your parents watch the Olympics and they're like, oh, that's a real sport. It's not like a side hobby. So I think
skateboarding is not a crime.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a crime. It's cool. It's, but the point being is it's like the way that the Olympics can change perception of what is a sport, right? That's why everyone wants to get their sports into the Olympics, because the Olympics, not only does it grow the popularity, but it makes it real almost, which is great.
That's even why the gaming industry is still somehow interested in being acknowledged by the Olympics. Obviously, they have their own esports tournaments, and one could argue that the ESL is the Olympics of esports, and so, or the NBA or the FIFA World Cup. So why do you need? It's about prestige. It's about recognition. It's about being part of the sports movement at large, and being credible.
It's also about being mainstream, because what happens when you watch the Olympics is people just switch it on, right? And they have it in the background all day for the 2 weeks that the Olympics lasts. And so, you'll be watching rock climbing. You would never tune into the World Rock Climbing Championships, but because it's the Olympics, and then you're like, oh, that's cool, right? So it increases participation, but it also increases popularity for the sport from people who would never be exposed. I mean, it's literally the best way to be exposed to new sports. The amount of people that don't, I mean, obviously I'm a big field hockey fan and I've worked at it, but like a lot of people will watch the Olympics and then go, oh, field hockey's really cool. It's fast, penalty corners, whatever else. So, and the commentary does such a good job of educating you on how does it work and, whatever else. So there's not many avenues like that where you are watching something and they're catering the commentary to like people who are novices, never seen the sport before, and obviously experts as well. It is so mainstream, and the exposure is great.
Yes. And it has created sometimes big stars. Like Michael Phelps is an example I always remember. When you completely dominate in one of the main events, or Usain Bolt. I mean, Usain Bolt is one of the biggest stars in sports still today. And it's magic that happened at the Olympics, because you might even beat a world record there, and then it's double magic for you.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But at the same time, though, it's very uneven, right? How people benefit from the Olympics. So you have these star stories, these breakout stories who really, it's life-changing. And then you have many athletes who struggle to make ends meet and have to get 1 or 2 jobs like the rest of us in between competitions, despite winning gold and despite sometimes being famous. I sometimes find that strange about the Olympic movement.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's, it's such an unfair advantage to those countries who don't have the resources, right? Or, calling a spade, there's a lot of like corrupt organizations where the money is not flowing to the athletes or whatever else. Obviously, how much sponsorship money is there in certain countries of the world? So I think it just is, but it's not just the Olympics, right? It happens in every single sport.
It's a reflection of the world.
Exactly.
It's the world we live in, and sports are not immune to it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's also about luck. Is the sport in which you're one popular? For example, in the US, if you win gold in badminton, it's not going to be the same that if you win gold in basketball or track and field or swimming, right?
No,
So there is also that element that you could be a goat of a sport that nobody cares to sponsor. And that's really bad luck. I always remember Sergei Bubka, the Ukrainian pole vaulter. He dominated this sport like no one, I think, ever dominated the sport before or after. But he was in the old USSR, and pole vaulting is also not the most popular thing. And he was so dominant that he removed the suspense element out of it. That the only thing we would worry about is, does he beat his own world record again? Or it becomes routine somehow. So all these elements, I don't think he was very wealthy, to be honest with you.
No, 100%. And then also it's a case of like, who else is in the final with you? Because like, if you went on to beat someone very famous, you're obviously going to be more famous than, so there are so many factors to like fame or whatever else, popularity. But I think the beautiful thing about now is it's so people can take clips and then suddenly they go viral, right? So like a world record or like whatever else. And pole vaulting is a very, it's a scary sport to watch. I think most people watch it and go, God, I would never be able to do that. And how do they do that? So I think like today it's easier to get the fame from even these niche sports because you share them, you watch them, like those clips and whatever else.
And like you said before, it's about storytelling. So sometimes it's about he comes from this upbringing, he comes from this, he overcame this when he was young. I saw, I think it was on Instagram, maybe another platform, some ads from Open Sponsorship to sponsor Olympian athletes. It was in the run out for the. How did that go? And how easy? Because usually, let me reframe. Usually, if I come to you and say, oh, I want to book in basketball, you're going to tell me these are the hot ones in NBA. And next week, it's still going to be pretty much the same because, we need another NBA finals for things to change. With the Olympics, you need a lot more flair though, right? Because you don't know yet who might you have these up and coming. So how do you go at this?
It is difficult because firstly, the trials are so close to the actual games. So, I remember there was a major Olympic sponsor and of their 5 athletes that they picked for their program, 3 of them didn't even make it into the Olympics. So, it's hit and miss.
What happens then? What happens then? Is there a contractual clause we cannot disclose, but
yeah, you would expect that there would be some clauses that say if you don't make the Olympics, but the other thing is like, you also don't want to be like the bad guy if you've got a multi-year contract, like the guy's already down and now you do that. So I think you have to risk it. But that's why, obviously a platform like ours is really helpful because you can make decisions very close to the time. But the problem is that you're so close that our marketing budget's available. So we did do quite a lot of deals just between trials once we knew who was going in. Obviously, some sports are easier. Like, the women's national team, soccer is going to be in, like the NBA team, certain athletes. But a lot of, and then also like, one of the deals we did was with a wrestling guy. Like, it's not like a lot of people are following wrestling. So then you have to figure out how good is he and whatever else. So, but the opportunities were there, especially to do like social and things like that. Obviously this year was even harder because we weren't even sure what was going to be. What was going to happen? Could it get cancelled last minute? But
Japan still had it as a possibility to cancel it 24 hours before.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was like, how do you even cancel it 24 hours before physically, logistically? It's like grounding a plane, really. But yeah, you're right. All that uncertainty is not a good thing for sponsoring and brand money. And I'm guessing probably a lot of the deals that went through were also made at lower rates than they would have been 4 years ago or in 4 years from now.
Good question. Probably. Definitely more short term. So less like longer term stuff, like, Usually we were doing like 3-month deals. This was very much like more one-off stuff. There was also logistical things about even getting the products into the hands. So then we saw some stuff that was like, I'll come back and do it. Therefore, it's even lower. So yeah, definitely like a lot of different nuances to consider.
Oh yeah, the shipping and logistics. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, Fraser, if you're watching. He's working controllers for. So basically, I cannot reveal what it is, but there is a big controller that he's launching with big brand tie-in and all that and he's launching it in October. So he's going through the logistics of a product launch right now. And he was telling me how, and also John Schultz told me some stuff about some samples that were super hard to get from China right now. And at some point I was like, but I don't understand because, cargo is not people, so it's not going to pass COVID around. And he said, no, but 80% of the cargo space right now is used to ship masks, medical supplies. It's like a war effort. So you have to deal with the last 20%. Plus, when air freight is full, we usually put a few stuff in the back of the empty commercial flights that are not full. But these commercial flights have been diminished by 80% as well. So you cannot use that as a backup anymore. Right. And then you have all the boats that thought that the Suez Canal would be cut. It only was for a week, but they made the decision before the end of the week and went around Africa, which means they're not going to arrive before another 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
So you have a big, long line of boats going around Africa right now. And obviously these boats are not at the container ports unloading and loading again. So yeah, when you pile all this up, I realize that shipping a little something to someone right now might be a bit hard. All right. Now, you said going into the athletes booking and all that and all on your ads, another ad I saw regularly from you is that thing where you say athletes, I started open sponsorship because athletes are the best influencers. Why is that? Compared, for example, to a YouTuber or an A-lister from Hollywood, why is the athlete better?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're biased. It's what we do. So, let's start off with that. But honestly, when you think about the most influential people ever in history, the guys whose quotes, maybe you could say politicians as well, but like when you really think about people whose quotes get passed around or like those iconic moments or like where you were when X happened, a lot of that is related to sports, right? So, my favorite one is a Muhammad Ali quote. My first ever poster was Ryan Giggs from Manchester United. When you think about, we just talked about the Olympics, or when you think about like big major events that if you said like you could do anything, what would you want? Most people would say, I want to go to the Super Bowl or whatever else. So sports like moves us in a way that no one else does. And athletes are, they're the players in the game, right? That they were what makes sports. And so influencers, obviously there is a lot of beauty and everything else and fashion, but I think that was mostly because sports did not keep up. Athletes did not keep up with, like, agents did not keep up with the idea of what influencers meant. And
because it was never a primary revenue source.
Exactly.
They made decent, to make an understatement, they made decent salaries from just practicing sports. It's not like they really need the endorsement money.
Exactly. And then, it isn't what they do. They're not natural content creators either, which is where I think a lot of athletes get left behind in the influencer game. But when you think about like storytelling, authenticity, those kind of things, it would be demographic match. I always say that the most famous person by far outside of New York, LA, San Francisco is the athlete. And even in New York, LA, and San Francisco, I'd probably hazard a guess that the most famous person, if you did a survey of someone on the street, top 3 most famous people that live in this vicinity, an athlete would be in that. And so whether it's demographic local, or whether it's like male to male, female to female, or whether it's like younger and you talk about skateboards to appeal to 13 to 17-year-olds, or older and you talk about retired golfers appealing to 80-plus-year-olds, like athletes can cover everything in a way that, you know, when you think about who influences Hispanic communities, great, soccer, baseball, who influences African American, you know, obviously like American football, basketball, who influence whatever it may be. And so I think athletes are the most amazing set of influencers. It's just most influencer marketing managers just default to traditional, like what we call people who get paid to post something, influencers.
Yeah, you make two great points. One is to the advantage of the athletes, unlike YouTube or TikTok, they cater to all ages groups and demographics, where on YouTube, I challenge you to find a channel that will reach over 40 years old significantly. Obviously, I'm 43 and I watch YouTube, but find a channel that does 40 million, 10 million views, and 8 million of these views are over 40. No, that doesn't exist. And I've tried. I've looked for it for years. It doesn't exist. But to the advantage of the YouTube creators, you said another point, which is the athletes are lagging behind because they're not natural content creators. And that's probably why the YouTube creators have become the default go-to, is because they do two things. Reach, but they also create their own creative agency. They come up with the ideation, which saves a lot of time. In sports, you're absolutely right that some of them are better at it than others. And we all have some commercials in mind from before the influencer days where actors were paid to say 2 lines in a 30 seconds, athletes were paid to say 2 lines in a commercial. We all know they did 40 takes, and the best of the 40 takes still really sucked, if you forgive my French, and became laughing stock. So if you're not good in front of the camera, I understand why you would be shy, because you're shining when you have the ball in your hands or in your feet. And then when you talk, it's not that great. So you might as well tell them, focus on the moment when I have the ball in my hands, please. I shine then. But some of them are really great at it. Some of them are really, really great at it, and prove your point that when they try and when they get good at it, then the numbers go really up and up and up and up. Because there is still that starstruck effect for many, that, oh my God, that level of a star came on Instagram and did a story today. I can't believe this. I thought it, because they imagine, they're too busy, they're training all the time, which they train hard, but not 24/7 either. All right, earlier we talked about mental health. And that's also very close to my heart, because at the beginning of my career, I was a workaholic. I've known burnout. And then I've seen it in so many YouTube creators who, when they became stars, went into a bad rush. And at some point, there is that burnout. You're a very successful CEO and woman working with athletes all the time, which is very demanding. Did you achieve work-life balance yet? And what's your trick? What's your secret if you did?
I think I've achieved work-life balance to some extent. I definitely still feel guilty. So I'm not sure whether being guilty about not working hard equals work-life balance, but I will force myself. And I think the main thing there is, one is recognition that you have to allow your team to do things, right? Like that's the only way we're going to grow. And so doing everything yourself doesn't make sense. Like being up at 1 a.m. and sending out emails to team members doesn't make sense. It's not nice for anyone. And then just doing everything myself also doesn't make sense. So I'd say once you start realizing, okay, you're going to delegate and the team is going to go at their pace, which might be a pace slower than yours, but it is what it is. And as long as you retain people and whatever else. So I'd say I was almost forced to get work-life balance when I stopped being just an entrepreneur and became a CEO. And then the second is the recognition that, you know, working out, being healthy, meeting people, networking is a big part of my job. And so that naturally then means, like, as I said, I always say I work hard and I play hard, but I definitely feel guilty. So I'm not sure if that's perfect, but it's there.
I don't feel guilty when I don't work hard anymore. I only feel guilty when I don't have a productive day. So I stopped measuring the number of hours I put in. It's about what did I get done today. So it might be, we get that contract signed and I wanted to get it signed. We get that meeting, and at the end of that meeting, he said yes. So we got a handshake now. I've done that deck that I said I would have done today, and it's finished. And I passed the instructions to this guy and he understood. That's a great day.
Yeah.
And I had all these 4 things to do today. And for some reason, one didn't work out, cool. But for some reason, you have days like that. You know, I call it bad karma because the company's big karma. There are days like that where I tell my wife by 4 o'clock, it's not my day. Nothing is going to get through today. Nothing. And I probably are going to have 2 new problems unforeseen that are going to fall on my lap by 6 o'clock today. I can feel it as one of those days. And then I feel guilty. Then I feel guilty because I have nothing to show to myself for. It's like I worked 8 hours and I achieved nothing. What a loser. What a loser. That's you know, getting on the pitch and hitting 0 balls. Why did we show up? But if I achieved a few things, then it's not about the number of hours I put in. It was a good day. I got lucky, and sometimes you get lucky in sports. And I view everything I do as sports, to be honest with you, collective sports. So if it helps you, don't be guilty if you didn't work hard. Yeah. Just be guilty if you sucked today. But don't you think the guilt is also... The last few years, I realized that part of why I'm fearless is because I experienced guilt. I fought a lot against the guilt over the last 20 years because my mother is a very over guilty person. And so, you know, when you start seeing something in your mom and in your brother and in yourself, you're like, maybe I start working on that. And I feel like, obviously, it's a Judeo-Christian thing. In Europe and America, guilt is part of our upbringing and conditioning. Right. In some cultures, less so. And they are freer about trying things and failing things in cultures that don't cultivate guilt. And even in the disability representation field, sometimes people don't do anything because they feel guilty about something, and so they feel they have to. Guilt messes with your instincts somehow, and it makes you overthink things where you could just pat somebody on the back or give him a high five, and because you're overthinking, and it's like, oh, but I have all this guilt that I carry. I don't know. You feel guilt gets in the way of many, many good things, and part of mental health is letting go of guilt.
I will think about it.
It's something I actually tell my wife all the time, you know. We have a disabled kid at home. We're not perfect. We can suck. We can fuck up. We are humans. It's fine. The only thing that when you are in the business of juggling with balls, you're gonna drop some. And the only thing that matters is, are we there for each other to pick up without complaining when one of the ball drops on the floor? And no guilt about dropping the ball. You're juggling. What else did you expect?
No, it's true. I like it. It's good.
All right, Ishveen. It was great to talk to you, as always, in 2 half times. Perfect sport analogy because of the technical interruption. For anybody who listened, obviously, you can check us out at patreon.com/bigkarma and support us if you want to pay for our next coffee. And in the meantime, may karma be with you, Ish, and talk to you real soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
And good luck with your Series A. Did you close it? Are you closing it today?
Soon, very soon.
Cheers. Thank you so much.